Hello ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. As promised, it's time to look at some stats. The second reset for Naxx has just come to an end and I want to see them numbers. The stats of this video being taken on the 16th of December. So the raid overall has surely proven to be more of a challenge than anything to come before it, so just where are players struggling in tier 3 and why? To start things off, we need a bit of a disclaimer. See, when I first did the Blackwing Lure stats, I never really intended for this to be a thing that I'd do moving forwards, I just did it for fun. So for BWL and then later AQ40, I looked at the progress stats after 10 days of the content being out, no particular reason behind it. For Naxx, I wanted a solid 2-week time frame to have gone by. I figured pretty much every guild interested in the raid content would have had more than a couple raids by then to check out how it's laid out, and also to allow for any potential bug fixes if that were to be a thing at all. It just made more sense than midway through the second reset to do it this way moving forwards. Also, I was just going to use the EU and NA data for this, which I had done for AQ40, but not for Blackwing Lure. However, when I went to look at the stats, Warcraft logs doesn't load any data beyond page 50 for progress for sub-regions. So yeah, if more than 2,500 guilds had defeated a boss, I couldn't see anything beyond that. This means I have to now use world rankings instead. And Warcraft logs also doesn't allow you to search progress by most recent, so I thought I was going to have to spend about an hour tabbing through literally hundreds or even thousands of RSI inducing pages to find the most recent clears. Fortunately, you can search the pages in the URL and make an educated guess as to the clear amounts, which made it take considerably less time. So guy on Reddit who did those graphs recently, hopefully you hear this or have figured that out by yourself. Finally, the way Warcraft logs shows progress sort of, well, it doesn't really mean anything in the big picture. It just shows how many guilds have cleared X number of bosses. The only one that really means anything here is 15 out of 15. Guild A could have done the Spider Quarter and Noth the Plaguebringer, and they're 4 out of 15. Guild B could have done the Construct Quarter, and they are also only 4 out of 15. Even the actual progression number relates to the difference between the guilds that are example 4 out of 15 and 5 out of 15, not the total number of guilds who have cleared said number of bosses. So basically, I'm going to have to manually search through the total number of world clears of each boss by guessing the last page of progress for each of the 15 bosses, and then do my own progress breakdown based off of that. So if you wouldn't mind dropping a sub if you want already and a like on the video, I'd feel a lot better about how long this took. Cheers. With that said, let's do this. So just for a frame of reference, Blackwing Lure by day 10, as per my other video, had about 75% of guilds that had logged at least one boss, having also defeated Nefarian, making the overall success rate players saw being very high. AQ40, as expected, was tougher for sure, and indeed the first time players saw real progression. It was also the first raid to feature optional bosses, 2 of which had less clears than the old god Cthulhu, surprisingly. Once again, as per my previous research, out of all the guilds worldwide that logged at least 1 kill in this raid, 63% went on to defeat Twin Emperors by day 10, 47% of players taking out Cthulhu, 42% took out a very large Samwern named Oro, and only 24% of players managed to defeat a rather large blob called Vistidus. So with Naxx Rammus, we are giving players a whole 4 extra days worth of clear time. So surely stats will be higher? Well, let's take a look. To no one's surprise, the Spider Quarter has been overall the easiest one to clear, and by a long shot at that. Anubra Khan with 11,470 clears having been completed, Grand Widow Felina barely behind that at 11,407, and even Maexna isn't too far behind that with 11,179 clears completed by the end of the second reset worldwide. Definitely a quarter where you can get your foot in the door in Naxx Rammus and even boast some amazing loot with things like Kiss of the Spider or Wraithblade. The next easiest quarter is a bit up in the air because from here on there are much less free bosses. It's a close one and you'll see why, but I'd put Construct next. Patchwork, 8,643 clears in 2 weeks. This big boy is a big gatekeeper to this quarter. Believe me when I say if your guild can beat this guy, the rest of the quarter shouldn't be too much of an issue either. Grobulus had 8,587 clears. The big dog at the end of the pipe, Goloth, with 7,593 kills. Quite the drop off from Grobulus actually, more than I would have expected. And Thaddeus, the boss that tests your raider's ability to jump and see whether they have a plus or minus next to their name, has 7,133 kills logged. Not too bad. Next quarter is Plague. Plague is kind of strange in that it starts off with arguably one of the freest bosses in the whole raid, and ends with a tough encounter. In fact, the last boss is the only reason I would say this quarter is above Construct in difficulty. Noth the Plaguebringer saw 11,033 defeats in the opening weeks. Pagan the Unclean with quite the drop off at 9,443. The dance is definitely more of a trap than I expected it to be, especially when you can get hit from this far away out of the goo. I'm going to go ahead and blame spell batching on this one, or maybe I was in it. I'd definitely pop a Greater Nature Protection Potion for this fight. You don't want to be that guy who falls over in here. But the real wall of this quarter is definitely Lotheb, with 5,381 kills. A severe drop off from anything else that we've seen so far. This boss, pretty much you just need to pay up the consumable tax. Coming ill prepared is really setting yourself up to fail. Whilst mechanically simple, the lack of heals going out require your raiders to have brought the items needed to win here. Owen Alliance have it much easier too. Paladin with Judgment of Light and the tier 1-8 set are just very good raid and group-wide heals respectively, and clearly that makes Kiss of the Spider Holy Pala prio, by the way. This big fungal boy has proven to be one of the top challenges in the raid so far, but not as much as the military quarter. There's just straight up no freebies here. Vesuvius has 8,999 clears, a gimmick fight, but one that can just go wrong super fast, and throws priests randomly into the tanking role for the first time ever. Gothic I thought was surprisingly hard actually at 8,597 clears. I didn't think it would be so much of a challenge, but it can really get out of hand very quickly, especially since you require the raid to be split. But I'm pretty sure we all know the challenge of the military quarter was always gonna be 4 horsemen, which stand tall at 3,508 clears worldwide. Mechanically, pretty complicated. This fight is more of a dance than Hagen is, to be honest, with your entire raid having to manage their stacks and positioning correctly. This fight was totally built up to be hard and a challenge, and I'd say that it's really lived up to its legacy, which I'm quite happy about. But after 13 bosses drop, you can finally enter the Frostworm Lair and take on the final 2 bosses. The real final boss though isn't KT in this instance, it's Sapphiron, who is definitely more difficult, with 2,359 clears worldwide by the second reset. Very early clears were made extremely difficult by the lack of high quality frost resistance gear available, but once you start picking it up it really does bridge the gap very quickly. It's also partially another consumable check. Even popping a shadow protection potion can be highly beneficial. The life drain curse just hits really hard even if one tick goes off. Work on your frost resistance gear, coordinate good raid positioning for the air phases, and the Drake will drop. Which leaves Kel'Thuzad, who as of doing this video has 2,191 clears worldwide. The fight itself is a bit of a mix between a consume and a mechanics check, as well as still picking up a fair challenge. The fight isn't a freebie by any means, and it's one of the first fights that will give your melee a nice warm up for TBC by including mechanics which are a real pain for them to deal with. So percentage wise, where are we at? If we take Anubra Khan as our number to base everything off, that being 11,470, yes, some guilds in the logs may not have killed him, but I reckon that's going to be a very small number. It's the one with the most clears overall, so I think it makes the most sense to use. So overall, out of every guild to land a clear on Anubra Khan by the end of the second reset worldwide in Naxx, 97% of guilds managed to complete the Spider Quarter. 62% of guilds took down all of the Construct Quarter. 47% of guilds bested the Plague Quarter. 30% of guilds have taken down the 4 Horsemen in the Military Quarter. 20% of guilds have defeated Sapphiron. And the big number, 19% of guilds have defeated Kel'Thuzad and managed to achieve 15 out of 15, a full clear of Naxx within the first 2 weeks. Viscidus again was about 24% of guilds by day 10, and with all those extra days thrown in, many less guilds have been able to complete a full clear of Naxx, showing that for once in Classic, it's a raid that I would say has lived up to expectations. Oh, also by the time when I'm doing this video, AQ40 has about 22,500 total clears this moment worldwide, so that's just something to consider. I also took a screenshot of clears just after the first reset of Naxx. It was only for EU and NA. I was still planning on counting up the total clears like that back then, but you can see here the progression at the top end was a very small number of guilds. In fact, if you even saw Sapphiron in the first week of Naxx, you were in a really small minority of players actively progressing that far in the new content. I think a lot of people expected clears to fly up very quickly in the weeks to come for Naxx with more frost resistance gear for Sapphiron, but Lotheb, 4 Horsemen, and even Patchwork can still pose a real challenge if you come ill prepared or just make a big mistake. I think Naxx goes a long way to show a change in raid design from Blizzard back then to more actively consider world buffs and consumables. as well as how impactful actually having patch appropriate itemization and class balance is for once. Hopefully this can bode well for TBC. So hopefully your guild doesn't implode over Christmas before you do get to see the content through at least one time. How are you getting on though? Full clear? Still working your way there? And what do you think of this final tier of Classic? Hit me up below. As always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon. If you like what you see, do give the video a like and subscribe, as there will be plenty more to come. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.